I wanted to start off to say thank you so much for being on the show. If y'all don't know, you need to know who Sandy is, Sandy Hudson. She is an amazing activist. She is a podcaster and officially, as of April 15, an author.
That's right.
How does that feel to add that to your resume?
I mean, it feels kind of like a relief, I'll say, because, there's a lot that goes into a book, a lot that goes into writing. It takes some time. Mm-hmm. So it's just really a relief and gratifying to see it out into the world. And it feels good. It does.
Nice. Well, before we get into the book, the main idea and the time that we're going to really focus on the book, not too much on the podcast. I'll probably have to invite you for the podcast aspect. And so you and Nora have a show called Sandy and Nora, where you keep it real on the podcast. What made y'all start Sandy and Nora Talk Politics? Like how do you make this big, complex political stuff feel grounded and relatable?
Well, honestly, Nora and I used to work together. We used to work in the same office in Toronto in a student advocacy group, the Canadian Federation of Students. And so we became really fast friends and colleagues and found ourselves having a lot of political conversations about the way that politics operate in Canada, and oftentimes having arguments about how we felt about things in Canada, but always coming to a place of more understanding through conversation. And then, our time working together ended. Yeah. Nora moved from Toronto to Quebec, and eventually I moved to Los Angeles. And so I remember after she moved, she was just like, I want to continue our conversations that I feel like we had all the time. We should continue having them once a week, and we should record them. And I was like, that's nuts. No one would be interested in hearing our rants about the politics in this day and age. She's like, I think they would. And I really didn't believe it. It took some cajoling by Nora to convince me to put our conversations out there. But it turns out that people are really not only interested, but craving frank political analysis by some really smart people, if I do say so myself.
Oh, you're smart, yes.
And, from a perspective that we don't often see in the mainstream media, which I think is really important. So I'm happy that she convinced me to do that, and that we're, still doing it 8 years later.
That's wild. 8 years. I know, like I've been podcasting 10 years, so I know what it takes. And you're saying like smart people, listening to y'all honestly makes me smarter, and I'm sure for your listeners smarter too. And you're continuing to make people like a sense of helping us get smarter and understanding things with now your book that came out April 15th. Your book is Defund Black Lives, Policing and Safety for All by you, Sandy Hudson, that challenges the deeply rooted belief that policing ensures public safety. Obviously, there's more to that when it comes to the book. When it comes to defund the police, still, it makes some folks panic or a little like nervous. So for people who aren't familiar with abolition and just hearing about it through headlines, what are we really talking about when you say defund? Like how is that actually about keeping people more safe and not less? And, I remember people asking me about defund, and you would think that it's usually people who has the same skin tone as us, who ain't Black. But you'd be surprised, even within our community, it's not very clear. So, yeah, what can you tell me? What can you say about defund?
Yeah, it's funny how people will be really nervous about defund the police, but you hear like cuts to education or cuts to healthcare, and it doesn't inspire the same sort of discomfort. I wish that it could, I wish that it could, but I know that there's a lot of what I call in the book Copaganda out there that makes it really difficult, actually. It makes it really difficult to kind of really take into account what this means and understand that it is quite rational. It's very, very rational. And so what does it mean? It's really simple. It's just to remove resources from the police and put those resources into services, institutions, and policy measures that will actually create the conditions of safety for our society, rather than wasting them on a service that hasn't worked and consistently doesn't work to make our society more safe.
Now, when you're saying, so is it shifting funds? Because for some people, they hear like, are you saying no more police?
I mean, yeah. if you read the book, like I am saying that. But the question that you ask, like, am I saying shifting funds? Yes. Yes. And am I saying no more police? Yes. Now, I think where people get confused is they think what I mean by that is that tomorrow I would like you to fire all cops and dunzo, we're good. Right. And that is obviously not what a rational argument would look like, which is not what I am arguing in the book. What I am arguing is that right now, if you were to ask any expert, what is it that the police do well? I promise you, on any sort of safety issue, there's nothing, there's nada. And for any other public service, if there was such consistent, massive failure, they would not continue to get not only increases in funding each year, but a greater and greater share of the total amount of money that is available to us in society. And so I'm saying, like, for example, let's look at one of the most common ways that people are harmed in society. That's gender-based violence. It's an epidemic in Canada. Femicide is an epidemic in Canada. We saw the Liberal Party talking about that a lot during the last election. Mark Carney made promises on femicide. Okay, femicide's been an issue in Canada for decades.
And what do you mean by femicide? Because I'm sure there's some that are like, what does she mean by that?
What am I talking about? Yeah, good point. Good question. Femicide is the killing of women, murdering women. It's a gender-based violence that could look like through domestic violence, or it could look like stranger violence, or it could look like violence against particular communities like Indigenous women and girls. And so this is an epidemic in Canada, the killing of women, so much so that it's reached the national stage in an election. However, it's been an issue for decades. And who are the people who are supposed to be solving that? We give a bunch of money to police, but policing hasn't solved the problem. It hasn't. And one of the reasons why it can't solve the problem is because policing is a reactive service. It reacts to issues that happen. And so the police are going to get involved after someone's already experienced harm. And part of what a defund the police mindset is saying is like, can we start a little earlier? Can we try to prevent this from happening in the first place? Do all our eggs have to be placed in the punishment basket? Can we instead say this shouldn't be happening at all? And take that approach to the way that we experience violence and harm throughout our society. I think we can. I think it's harder. I think that for politicians, it's like easier to just say, we'll throw some money at the police and they'll do it. But it's a much harder project to say, how do we prevent violence from happening? It's not impossible, but it's harder. And I think that is the responsibility our policymakers are shirking when they put more and more money into policing, despite the fact that we know that it's an ineffective service And oh, by the way, it targets and interrupts the lives of Black people.
So I'm so glad you said that, because like I was saying earlier, I've been asked that question. And I mean, I understand defund, and I just never really had the language. But just talking to you, I feel like I'm gaining some language here. Is it?
And that's why I wrote the book, so that feels real good.
Read the book, because that's what it is. It's providing you language. It's providing you understanding. There's stats. It's almost like is it safe to say, it's almost like you're saying, pause what policing is. Let's look at it. And then almost it's like a reset, having a different approach. Like, I've always said, when it comes to like when they say serve and protect, like actually do that. You know what I mean? Don't just put that as a logo or as a mission, like a mission statement. Like, really, the approach should be, when you say serve and protect, being proactive, not wait until a crime is committed, and that's when you react, like you said. Is it safe to say that, like, that part of that is also like a reset?
A little bit. I mean, I wouldn't call it a reset, to be honest. I don't think I would say that it's really taking a look at it and resetting it, because I'm honestly saying this approach just
it's not working.
It's just not it. Because the thing is, we have looked at it. There's been study after study after study. There's been reports. There's the Michael Tulloch report. There's the Stephen Lewis report. There is reports about every 10 years. There's a report on policing where they look at policing and they're like, man, this really isn't working for anything. Here are the things that we need to shift and change. And so we have decades of reports from different jurisdictions across Canada, across the United States. In the book, I also look at the United Kingdom, across the United Kingdom, and they all by and large say the same thing. Policing is failing at keeping us safe, over and over and over. This serve and protect language, it's relatively new. It was never actually created or meant for service and protection. And that's why it keeps failing at that. It was meant to accomplish 4 really concrete goals, which I lay out when I talk about the history of policing in the book. And it's like those 4 goals were to control Indigenous populations and their access to the land, to control enslaved populations who were getting more numerous than the enslavers, and they needed to make sure that Black people were kept in line, and to control the working class against the business owners, that they wouldn't rise up against their exploitation, and to control people and their morality. And that meant, in the past, it could be like women walking alone on the street was not allowed at one point. Bouncing a red ball on Sundays in Toronto specifically wasn't allowed at one point. I don't know. They didn't want people to have fun on Sundays. To today, where we have laws about where you can drink, for example, whether or not you're allowed to use certain mind-altering substances versus others. Those are morality laws. And so those are the 4 purposes of policing. And you know what? Policing does accomplish those things really well still today. Keeping people where they're supposed to be and out of other places, kind of managing where certain identities show up in the world and where they don't. It certainly targets and focuses on Black communities continually today, and Indigenous communities continually today. When it comes to how people engage in work, where they're allowed to work, how they're allowed to express their frustrations with their employers, you will see, whether it's during strikes or job actions, who the police are protecting and who they are not. That remains a way that we are controlled, and our morality, certainly through drug laws, what types of crimes are crimes. Like, if you can't afford to take the bus, and so you hop the turnstile, that's kind of a morality thing. They're judging your poverty. They're judging your ability to pay for your for your life, and controlling that through policing, but it's not keeping anyone safe, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not about safety. So policing is doing what it was meant to do. And so I'm just saying, maybe we should have some services that are focused on service and protection, but it's not policing.
Right. I mean, just even the word policing, right? It's just that word alone says a lot in terms of the behavior of that group of people, right? Like,
it sure do.
You mentioned the word Copaganda, which is, I love that. You go in on Copaganda, it's so real. I wanted to like ask you from a creator's lens, since I'm in the show as Black Canadian creators, as creators and storytellers, what's our role in disrupting, whether it's traditional media or even this kind of new media that we're doing right now, those media myths about police being the good guys? And how do we start pushing different narratives that actually reflect the truth that I'm sure is mentioned in your book?
Man, that is such a good question. That is such a good question, because so much of what people think policing is and why it makes us uncomfortable when we start to think like, how could we exist in a world without police? Like, I get it. I've been there too. It took me some time to get here.
Yeah.
It feels really weird. And part of that reason is because, one, policing as a public service is not like other public services. It's not like education or healthcare. We're all going to be educated through a system, like 97% of us through the public education system. We're all going to interact with the public healthcare system at some point in our lives.
Which scares me as a Black woman. I'm not going to front. The public healthcare system sometimes scares me more than the police.
That's a whole other book.
That's a whole book. Yeah.
That's a whole other book. But when it comes to policing, it's less than 20% of us that will ever come into contact with police. But we all feel like we know what police are and what they do. And how is that? It's because of the stories we hear about policing that are kind of ubiquitous. They're everywhere. Like, how many different cop shows are there out there? You could watch Law and Order, NCIS, 911. Like, there's all sorts of different ways that you can get an idea of policing from television, from film, and then also the news, the way that the news is reported. Things have shifted recently. I kind of go into this in the book. It's kind of complicated, but things have shifted recently to focus more on like individual crime than broad news stories that impact everyone. And so when you have that, the stories that people are told really do tend to form what their opinions of the police will be. But the thing is, it wasn't always like this. They're actually, in the beginning of like the 1900s till about 1950, maybe 1940, there was a really, really significant tradition of presenting the police more how they were looked at from the average person. So if you go back to media from like pre-1940, you'll have the image of the bumbling police officer. The bumbling police officer who's eating a lot of donuts, messing up, antagonizing people. Kind of stories that were being presented about police, because that's how everybody felt about police on the ground. And so what happened? A couple things, both in Canada and the US. Canada was like, well, we want to make sure that people see the RCMP as like a really great institution. And so they created all of this propaganda, these films that you can go and watch of, these RCMP and in their uniform, a friendly police officer. And similarly, with the big media juggernaut that is the United States, police outfits and the FBI actually contracted with Hollywood to shift the way that people saw policing. There were actual agreements in place to change the way that policing was viewed by changing how they were depicted on screen. And there was also something called the Hays Code that was adopted. It was a piece of legislation in, I believe it was 1939, that actually banned certain types of depictions of crime and policing on television and movie screens. So it was really deliberate. And then it became a part of the culture of how we present police as heroes rather than how they had always been presented in the culture as kind of this bumbling annoyance in your life.
Man, I wish we could speak longer.
There's so much to say.
There's so much I have so many questions. I'm going to have to invite you back.
I'd love to come back.
Oh, hold on a second. My camera's acting funny. My bad. Can you still hear me?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm going to use this one. Okay. It's not my favorite camera. It's my laptop camera, but okay. We're going to work with that. Yeah, I have so many. I'm going to have to invite you back because I need to ask you all these other questions.
I'd love to come back.
In the meantime, I have one more. The last one is what gives you hope right now? Could it be in the culture, the art, or just people showing up? What's keeping your spirit lifted these days? Especially after writing such a pretty strong book like this.
Yeah, I mean, I work with a lot of artists, so that's really important. If you're ever feeling down and doing the work that you do, just convene with the artists who can continue to dream against all odds. That keeps me lifted. And also, I do capoeira. I do this martial art.
Oh, okay.
That is a lot of fun. I'm not very acrobatic, so I'm not excellent at it or whatever. It's a very humbling experience, but there's singing and there's playing of music. And so that always keeps me super lifted. And so, just keep regenerating some of that energy that I need,
Yeah, for sure. You know what? I want to ask you a fun question. It's kind of I usually like to do, if we had more time, 3 rapid fire questions. So here's a fun one. What's a small habit or practice other than capoeira that's helped you stay grounded, or even when the world feels right now on fire?
Good question. Honestly, practicing gratitude.
Oh, nice.
And I really feel like that's a practice. If you wake up and you're anxious because the world is falling apart, there's fires all around you. I live in LA, so there's fires. There's fires all around you. It smells like a campfire. You're wow, I'm living in the time of the apocalypse. If you could just take a moment to breathe and think what are the things that I can be grateful for right now? It's the sun is out. And that's a beautiful thing, just being able to practice gratitude, to really think, I could call my mom today, she's an amazing person, can we practice gratitude? I think it really helps me. It might sound hokey, but it's actually a very, I think, helpful way to live one's life.
Mm-hmm. Man, Sandy, I'm hearing you speak. And I was I'd love to sit down and see how you research, how you research and how you find this info. There's just so much I want to know and love to learn based on the creating this book, writing this book and the process of it all. Cause it's not easy. I know after George Floyd, for me, I got a lot of phone calls. I got a lot of emails. I told my work, I need a week. And they're no problem. I was luckily enough to have that. And it's you being an activist. I know many activists in the United States myself. It's heavy work. So you saying gratitude is very helpful, very helpful. And I like how you said, to put it into practice and not just really make the effort to do that. Sandy, thank you so much. Where can people find you? And obviously Defund Black Lives, Policing and Safety for All by Sandy Hudson can be found at, I know it's on Amazon, I checked.
But I would also say, for those of you who are in Canada, A Different Booklist is a great Black-owned bookstore. It's my favorite bookstore.
Yes.
You can order it through there, support Black-owned businesses, support independent bookstores, or find your favorite local independent bookstore and order it through there.
You know what? I'm inspired by that so much that in the description of the show, I will place all the Black-owned stores that we can find in Canada. Because I know it's not just A Different Booklist in Toronto. There's many in other parts of Canada. So check out the description. And people can find you online as well?
Yes. I don't post a lot. Because if you listen to Sandy and Nora,
I was just going to say, you don't need to. They just need to listen to you.
Yeah. But I can be found on Instagram at Sandy M. Hudson and on Blue Sky at Sandala.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sandy.
Thank